Hey everyone, thanks for joining today. I'm really excited to give this presentation on how to master cloud marketplaces as a product organization, a product team, a product leader. And we'll dive into all kinds of fun subjects around digital selling, consumption based pricing, product led growth, and such. So, a little bit about me. I'm the VP of product at Tackle, and I joined in August, and I've been having such a blast with them. In my previous gig, I was the VP of product and engineering for the cloud business at Trend Micro. And it's during that time that I really uncovered a love for cloud marketplaces and digital selling. And during that journey, I got a chance to pioneer a lot of really cool innovations, which I'm going to share with you today, along with some of my learnings to pass on to you. So, what are the takeaways today? So, at the beginning of my journey, pricing was really important. So, I'm going to walk you through how pricing through a marketplace, what that experience was like, what problems did we solve, and what were the benefits of that. And then once we had our product around uh, purpose built for a cloud marketplace, how do you get the go to market team aligned and incented around this? And then lastly, a little bit on product strategy on how to structure your offer so it fits like a glove in the enterprise B2B market. So here's a little snapshot of my, it's about 7 years here or so journey with Trend. And when we started, it all triggered around customers needing seasonality and elasticity in their pricing. And that started our engagement at the bottom tier here around innovating with the cloud marketplaces. And we were fortunate enough to partner with cloud marketplaces on innovating a lot of really cool features that we could actually see in today in the industry, such as private offers, usage-based SaaS pricing, and all the different pricing dimensions available, moving to SaaS contracts and subscriptions. We actually did some innovation around migrating from proprietary pricing models like one-click navigate into directly into the marketplace, and more sophisticated things like cost allocation tagging, where you can assign costs to business units all on your cloud bill, and then into actually listing a full-blown platform. So that time we went from having a point product that evolved into a full-blown multi-service platform, and those were all the product innovations we partnered with cloud marketplaces. And during that time we really cut our teeth on how to ignite the sales team and to get marketing fully behind this and becoming savvy cloud go-to-market experts. And I'm going to walk you through some of those wonderful learnings now. So the first challenge we had, which was around 2015, was that traditional pricing models didn't fit naturally in a cloud conversation. Customers were used to buying cloud services in usage-based models and subscription models, not in these perpetual models with licenses and such. And so customers had probably resigned to overspending on buying what they needed for worst case. And in the case of security, they had to buy as much protection as they could in that negotiation and live on that for a year or two. And there might be an expansion, but it was very static, brittle. Um, the second problem we had is cloud migration has been huge the last decade. And so often our buyers weren't able to predict on how much migration would be occurring into the cloud because it was multiple business units migrating. So, how do you price a product that embraces that uncertainty? And then, lastly, over the years, different business units, different functions in IT had different budgets, but all of a sudden, this big emerging um, uh, uh, budget came out, which was the cloud budget, which aggregated all the cloud spend. And this became an increasingly powerful budget and set of decision makers. And there was some interesting dynamics in many enterprises during that time. So the way we solved those three pricing problems was we came up with what is the value metric? What is that one thing that customers could perceive as value and acquire more units of and believe that that's what they needed? And in all of our customer conversations, in the case of the product I led, was protection hours. This allowed elastic applications to spin up, seasonally or in an elastic way. Like, let's say an iPhone campaign had to, drum up a bunch of workloads, going from 1,000 to 10,000 for, let's say, 3 days, and then spin back down and have that level of protection. Those became very powerful, value oriented conversations for our customers. And the second point, we solve the uncertainty by going with a usage based pricing model in addition to subscription. That was discountable. There was a time on marketplaces where you could not discount the listing. And that was a big, big go to market obstacle. But once the cloud marketplaces embraced that, being able to discount based on volume or term length was really cool to see in a digital form. And then lastly, the budget decision. We found that going from having your own invoice on your own paper with your own T's and C's and then migrating and become a line item on a broader bill in a broader budget conversation was incredibly powerful, and we were onto something. And the result of this was it ignited a shift in how customers purchased. And we saw a lot of very high profile customers embrace these pricing models. And this became foundational in all the subtending product experiences that we built. So, the first takeaway for you on this is value metrics reveal the customer's perceived value of your product. This is really important. And if you don't know what a value metric is, just Google it. You'll get about 50 definitions. You'll probably pull in a lot of product led growth literature on this. And that is a really, really important thing to debate internally in your product teams across marketing and sales and figure out what is that value metric. And the second one was, how do you go from your paper onto cloud provider paper and be a line item on a bill? Like, that's super powerful, and really does change the psychology with the buyer. All right, so that's kind of the first phase. It was like 2015, 2016, where we were really focusing on the pricing. Now we're going to jump to, sorry, I'll leave you with a question. What's your value metric, and how will you measure your customer success, and how will they perceive that? So the second challenge, so once we changed all this pricing, how do you align a sales team or a broader sales and marketing team, the go-to-market team? Well, what we saw was the existing sales plans didn't map to these big changes we made. So there was something very unnatural here. And in fact, when you look at usage-based pricing or even subscription-based pricing, like at a monthly level, that can negatively impact a seller who has a comp plan that doesn't embrace those pricing models, where they have compensation plans really trying to sell lots up front, and they're measured every quarter. Usage based doesn't fit very well in that. So if I want to sell $1 million worth of value over 1 year, but it's going to trickle over 12 months, that seller wants to recognize that up front in the first quarter. And that became our first go-to-market obstacle. The second go-to-market obstacle we had was our sellers were able to speak confidently about the value, but it was less so around cloud and cloud marketplaces. And don't underestimate the domain knowledge needed in that. That was a really interesting dynamic that we had. You never want your customer to know more about cloud or cloud marketplaces than the seller. And then the last one was being able to tune the sales conversation around that value metric. So how did we resolve this? Well, we changed the sales incentives. We came up with this 2-page term called a committed consumption contract. Very simple, 4 fields: customer name, term length, what was the discount to the customer, and what was the agreed minimum amount to spend. And that piece of paper allowed us to book revenue in quarter. So if, going back to that $1 million example over 12 months, I could book $1 million because the buyer is legally obliged to spend $1 million over that 12-month term, but it's recognized in quarter. And so that seller all of a sudden was very excited. And this caused a brush fire, which was awesome. And then we also piled on with spiffs and marketing programs. And then we moved to training. We partnered with our marketing teams on sales enablement training to not just train on the value of the product in the offer, but how to speak cloud, how to speak cloud marketplaces, and how to navigate cloud buyer conversations, especially around pre committed spend, right? These big cloud budgets that already have been approved, you're removing a step from your sales motion if you can access that somehow. And then, when you're trying to drive change in terms of cultural change, you need to shop around and amplify all the power sellers' wins and really be loud about that, really frequent. And that was really contagious and got everyone excited across different sales regions. And the result of this investment in the go to market teams allowed us to go from a few champions to high hundreds of sellers, where this became increasingly normal. Now, this didn't happen overnight. This takes time. But, over time, it becomes normal. And in fact, it can actually become the default way of selling. And that result allowed us to be a top tier ISV across the ISVs. We won several awards, and we were definitely one of the top ISVs across the marketplaces. So, what are the takeaways on that? Is really make sure that your compensation model aligns with that pricing model. And if it's usage based or monthly subscription, it's got some granularity to it. You have to really look carefully and make sure you're going to at least be comp neutral. Comp neutral might not be enough. You got to get them over the edge if you really want to invoke that change. And then second, focus on that training, invest. It's really worth it. And it's not a one-time thing, it's continuous. It has to become part of their DNA to speak in cloud marketplace language, how to speak in digital selling terms. And then shop around those wins and celebrate them continuously and loudly. So, how do you empower and incentivize your sales force for your offer to support a cloud go to market product strategy? All right, that's something for you to think about. All right, let's go to the third challenge we had. So, if I back up again to this timeline, for that first, I'll say the first third on the pricing in between 2000 and 2019, really getting the go to market machinery retooled and incented and excited. The next phase from 2019 was, how do we address tool fatigue and vendor fatigue? So if you look across the enterprise, I think in any ISV will come across this, is there's too many tools and too many vendors. And when you have multiple business units buying multiple tools from multiple vendors, while within the business unit that might not be complicated and they're empowered to move fast and agile, the broader view at the enterprise level actually gets a lot more complicated and a lot more expensive. So, how do you address that, right? It's further exacerbated by, if business units and projects all have their own budgets, and that you need that, like, you need to move fast, you need to respond to the market. um, but how can you look at this and embrace these constraints going into it in your product strategy? So what we did was, we saw that we saw success with our product removing other tools, and we said there's a pattern here, and this pattern is really, really powerful. What if we actually built a full multi-service platform that actually simplified the customer's environment and removed more vendors and more tools and gave them more value with fewer vendors? That's a really important strategic thread that a lot of enterprise buyers look for. Um, And so what we did was, since we moved away from point products and we implemented everything into a SaaS fabric, a platform that had consistent APIs, pricing, docs, the scalability and resiliency models were the same, the compliance check marks were the same, and it was consistent. It wasn't six different sets of those, it was one set. And that, do not underestimate how much complexity that removes from a customer's environment. And then we were playing with different PLG tactics, such as free trials. We played around with free tiers as well. And there's a lot of experimentation there you can get going because buyers are more self service. They actually want to solve a problem with your product before making a purchasing decision. That is the new normal in 2022. So we did that. And the other part of that we did was by making this entire platform simply a line item on a broader cloud bill. You saw that pattern earlier. That allowed the discussion to go smoother in a larger cloud budget conversation. And the second order effect of this was quite immediate. Was I know in the first quarter we started seeing a jump in first time buys of multi-service revenue. So each service is priced differently, but priced with continuity. And it really, really took off on first purchases and then organic expansion that didn't require you to call a salesperson and say, hey, I want to expand, because it was all built into the cloud marketplace pricing models. So the ability to generate more revenue, more, like bigger deal sizes on the first time buy because you're solving multiple problems um, at first, removing other vendors, and then allowing organic expansion when the customers started using more of that same service or starting to use other services. It was a beautiful thing. And that gets you even more entrenched. So, to summarize, the third and final takeaway here is embrace the constraint that customers actually don't want more tools. They want less tools. They want less vendors. They want less complexity. So, how does that constraint influence your product strategy? And this is really important when you're designing your offer. What PLG tactics can you implement? And if you're not doing that, how can you make PLG kind of a standard part of product management training and leveling up the skill sets? It's really valuable insights. And we know a lot of, I think we all know quite a few of the ISVs that have done this really, really well. And it's not easy. It's really moving to data driven decision making and seeing, what features work, what features don't work, watching the customer go from A to B. What's the elapsed time, what's the time to value. There's all kinds of wonderful nuggets in there. So product led growth training and certification is a great thing, and then becoming a line item instead of a big invoice on your own island with your own paper, right? It just adds more complexity to the procurement workflow. Try to fit like a glove into a broader set of terms. When you look at an enterprise and their legal teams are looking at T's and C's for vendors, they would love one to a few sets of terms. In fact, the bigger ones obviously dictate them. So think about that. And then, yeah, and so try to align the ones in the cloud marketplaces. Those are a good trend to use, and they've had a lot of work on those. So my question back to all of you is, how can your product and buying experience embrace the constraint of a tool fatigue ridden enterprise environment, right? Think about that. Okay, so there we are. A quick road trip on my journey. Again, what are those three takeaways? Think about that value metric and build the product experience around that and price it accordingly and have it cloud marketplace ready. Second, once you get that product positioned and pivoted on that, how do you get your go to market field trained and incentivized on that? That is a necessary step or you will hit a wall. And then three, um, how do you embrace the constraint of a fatigue-ridden, tool fatigue-ridden, vendor fatigue-ridden environment and enterprise, and how can you um, embrace that constraint and deliver an offer that fits like a glove and helps simplify their environment? All right, why don't we go to Q&A? All right. So speaker chat question in the Q&A. All right. What do you mean you moved from a multi-product, multi-point product to a multi-service platform? Okay, Jason, let me try that again. So we had 6 products. They all did, let's say, one thing well. That's multiple point products. That's probably what I meant instead of multi-point products. Multiple point products. They were all in the same arena in cloud security. So we said, let's remove all those illities and documentation and UX and consolidate that into one SaaS fabric as a platform, as a single offer. Now, each of those individual products would still have their own pricing and experience, and a customer didn't have to use all 6, could use one at a time, just like using AWS cloud services or Microsoft Azure services or Google Cloud services. Nobody uses all the services in the cloud. They use a small subset. So it's the same approach, if you will. And when you do that, you're coming in as one vendor with multiple services. You have an opportunity to remove competition. If you're in a saturated environment, security, there's a lot of security tools in an enterprise. So this is from a security space. I don't know what tool you're in, but you can remove other overlapping tools with you if you have a broader set of value than others. I've seen this pattern a lot. Okay. Any other questions? I think there's some here in the chat. Let's see here. Okay, Robbie asked, in addition to drawing down spend, was simplified billing considered? Yes, absolutely. Like all of a sudden, a bill for the vendor effectively disappeared by becoming a line item on a cloud services bill. I'm oversimplifying, but that's essentially what happened there, and it works. It works well. Okay. Any other questions? All right, then. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Thanks very much. Take care.